Welcome back, my Be Health Empowered family. This is Dr. Melissa Clarke. Welcome to Excuse Me, Doctor. And of course, you all who watch this all the time know you can call me Dr. Mel. I am so happy you are joining us again tonight. We're here each and every week, Mondays, 9 p.m., 6 p.m. Pacific time, to make sure that you have the right, accurate information for yourself and your family to make the best health decisions possible and know how to advocate for yourself when it comes to your health care. So, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, you know that we're on Facebook. I would love if you hit that subscribe button. And if you're watching us on, sorry, I think I got that wrong. So if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. If you're watching us on Facebook, please hit that like button. And so remember, we're also here taking your questions. So make sure that you get your questions in the chat so that we can get to them first come, first serve. Now, that being said, let us get on with making an amazing week for ourselves with all the health topics we're going to cover this week. And to do that, you know, I got to bring my shotgun crew who rides with me into the studio. Miss Lila Mays coming in from LA and Mr. Wayne Bruce on the East
Hello,
Coast.
hello.
Shotgun. Shotgun. That's a health issue. Shotgun.
Right. We should not be advocating violence. You're absolutely right. But hey,
Dr. Mel,
it
how
means
are you?
y'all are my ride or dies. Is that a
That's
better
it.
way to
That's
say
it.
it? Okay.
That's it. We all ride. We ain't gonna die. We ain't going nowhere.
Right.
Pardon
Right.
me.
So the show
It's a
tonight.
producer takeover.
It's
Yeah.
Yes.
the producer takeover show. Hey, hey, hey,
Yes.
hey, hey.
All right, for
We
first-time
get
listeners, you have to tell them what that means, though.
it means we are going to talk about the things we want to talk about. We're going to ask Dr. Mel the questions we want to ask Dr. Mel. Well, y'all put some questions in the chat. Please do.
Right.
Ask her.
Lila May says this is a producer show. We're gonna need you really up on that mic so we can hear you. You know.
Okay, I'm right up on it. Don't know why you can't hear me.
All right. I mean, yeah, it ain't there. It does. We got the
I can hear you. So when you ask the questions, that is the important thing.
It is an important
Okay.
thing. It is an important thing. You know, we kick
All
off
right.
every week. You know, I feel like Dr. Mel today. We kick off every week where we go through some topics. So I'm gonna let Lila Mays go through the topics.
All right.
This is our weekly recap.
This is
Yes.
the
All
weekly
right.
recap. So we're gonna
We
do it. The
start with the
producer
numbers,
show
Dr.
looks
Mel.
like this all the time.
Okay, we're going to start with the numbers. So, we're talking about the numbers when it comes to COVID cases. We know we're way over 81 million cases. We're undercounting. We've established all that. The thing, though, with cases, they're on the rise. They're up 59% since last week. So we're averaging over 55,000 cases a day now.
Eek.
And yeah, that's a problem. And I don't know about you all, but a lot of people are calling me and telling me they have COVID. Or, we were supposed to go to a play last weekend and it got canceled because of rising cases at the high school. It wasn't Broadway, but it was important to us and it got canceled because someone we love very much was in it. So, yeah, I don't know about y'all, but that's my everyday experience is people calling me and telling me that they're testing positive. So,
Ugh.
and then we know hospitalizations are rising up 14% since last week. So it's not sort of just mild COVID that's out there. It's actually making people sick all over again. So we just have to make sure that we, continue to practice our safety features that we know. Great thing, deaths are still dropping. That's fantastic. But the numbers of those vaccinated still kind of in a holding pattern, haven't really moved above that
Yeah.
70% mark. Yeah. For those over 5, and about 48% of the country who's eligible has been boosted. So that's the folks over 12 years old. But remember, if you're over 50 or you have a low, immune system, go out and get that second booster. That's really important.
Shot
And
number 4.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm with it.
Just
Yeah.
call me Pinhead. I'm just I'm getting, I'm getting all the shots. All the
Right.
shots. So interesting. I'm not getting calls necessarily, Dr. Mel, from people I know who are testing positive. However, I'm in LA. And yeah, folks in the industry are testing positive. So shows are getting shut down or having to go on a hiatus unexpectedly. So it's definitely happening. And I just read somewhere that in the Coachella Valley,
Ooh.
there's a whole lot of cases of COVID.
What? How would that?
Why is
How
that?
would
Why
that
is that
happen?
not surprising?
Right,
Yeah.
Did they
right.
have an
After
event of some type?
like a couple people maybe showed up and played some musical instruments. Yeah, after Coachella, after 2 weeks of the Coachella Music Fest, there's some cases in the
Wow.
Coachella Valley. Yes, 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 yes.
Well,
As if.
that's not surprising. And then the other thing that I was wondering if y'all have a sense of is, what do Black people and white people have in common with vaccinations versus Asians and Hispanics? What they have in common? Let's take a guess.
Ooh.
I don't know, Dr. Mel. Is this a trick
Okay.
question?
No, it's not a trick question. So both Black people and white people are under vaccinated relative to their percent of the population, versus
Mm.
our Hispanic and Asian brothers and sisters are um, not but they have gotten vaccinated disproportionate to their numbers in the population. So they're taking it really
Interesting.
seriously. Let's put it that way. They are not messing around. And I think, the misinformation is still influencing both African
Mhm.
Americans and whites more than other groups. And so I think that's interesting, because normally, there's not a whole lot that we talk about that we have in common, but that unfortunately is one thing that we have in common. Um, Kids are still under
Mhm.
vaccinated. In some places, vaccination rate is less than 10%. Um, but we also heard that with vaccines, that those who are 5 years and under, so 6 months to 5 years old, may soon, as early as June, have a vaccine approved by the FDA. So
Okay.
that's
You have
important information for parents to know.
any thoughts around that, Dr. Mill?
Well, I mean, I think it's the last segment of the population that we don't have protection, in terms of
Mhm.
vaccination for.
Mhm.
I know that a lot of people are, for the same reasons that 5 to 12-year-olds vaccination rate hasn't been great. I think the same thing is probably going to happen. But there are still a lot of parents who've been anxiously awaiting, because, again, they have to protect them when they travel together, for example, um, or out in public together, because they know that they're not vaccinated as opposed to the rest of the family. So I think for a
Mhm.
lot of people, this will help to complete the fact that their entire family is protected.
Okay.
That's good.
I saw that. I saw a news story about that, and I'm like, ugh, 6 months. I don't
Well,
know.
6-month-olds are getting vaccinated against all the other childhood
Right.
issues. I mean, by the
That's
time
true.
a child is 6-month old, they've already had their 2-month vaccinations, their 4 months, and their 6 months. So it wouldn't be something that's out of the ordinary or
Sure.
um, totally off in left field. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, Go ahead,
No,
Wayne. Sound like you were about to
I'm
jump in there.
right. Everybody's jumping in. Look, so it's the producer show, so we could jump in at any time. So
Indeed.
I'm looking in the comments, right? And
Okay.
we have a few comments already. Let's just kick off the producer
Mhm.
show with Michelle Walker Scales, and she asks, "Do you think the cases rising due to? Do you think the cases are rising due to no mask and large gatherings?"
But of course.
Yes.
Yes, Michelle, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, we have this, confluence of like a perfect storm where immunity is waning from people who got boosted back in the fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have a more contagious variant that's going around, and everybody is throwing off their masks. We have 2 million people that travel by airplane every day, and another 76 million people who take some kind of public transportation. So, mask mandates leaving in those, just in transportation alone, is a major source of spread. Not to mention
Mhm.
people going to Coachella, people going on spring break and coming back to where they're from and bringing whatever they picked up with them as far as COVID goes. So, yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, I hate to say it, but it's kind of like, duh. Yeah.
Right.
It's, it's like, what did we expect? What
So,
did we expect?
so let's pick up on the Coachella thing. So Coachella was outside. We've been told that it's cool to be outside and
Hmm.
listening to music. It
Sure.
was it the amount of people together that was
No,
going on,
I
or you
think
think it's all the other things tied?
it's all the other things, those people have to go eat someplace, right? And a lot of times they're gonna go eat in a restaurant that's indoors.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna take off their masks, they're gonna go to parties afterwards. I'm sure people just didn't go to the concert and go home.
Right.
They took, maybe they shared cars to get there and,
Mhm.
with other people. So it's all the ancillary activity, not probably the concert itself, like you said, since it was outside.
Okay. Um, well, I just got off of a plane, and I have to say, maybe 10% of the people flying had masks on. Maybe 10.
Mhm.
I was in
Yeah,
that 10, of course. Um,
right. And I think the problem with the messaging about the removal of the mask mandates is removing a mask mandate doesn't mean you don't need a mask anymore. It just means that as a society, the decision makers have gotten tired of having to reinforce it.
mm,
So, as you're
mm,
making that decision for yourself about whether you're going to wear your mask, keep in mind that it doesn't mean that you're safe without a mask. It just means that you're at this point less likely to end up in the hospital because there are vaccinations and there's medication.
mhm.
And in public spaces, like I said, people are tired of fighting with people to keep their mask on. So it was just easier, from a business standpoint, to make the decision to remove mask mandates.
Yeah. You know what was interesting? In I was in business class, and so I didn't see anybody else with a mask on, right? So I sit down next to this woman and I have a mask on. And she was great because she was like, I see that you have your mask on. Would it make you more comfortable if I put mine on? And I was like,
That was
do
nice.
it was
Yeah,
nice. And I said, do what makes you comfortable. And she was like, well, you looks like you're being smart. And she ended up putting her mask on.
there you go.
Um,
Right,
It was
exactly.
just
yeah.
peer pressure.
It's peer
So we
pressure.
or
Yeah.
no, it was influence.
Okay, yes,
Oh,
that's an excellent way to put it. And just
Yeah.
influence.
just
Go ahead.
so just funny when you said you were in business class, I was like, "Oh, I didn't know Lila was in school for business."
I thought the same thing. Was it accounting?
Right.
I was actually in first class. I was just trying not to be all flossy
Come on now,
Oh,
come
on the
on.
digital. But
Hey,
oh,
put
anyway,
it
you
out there,
flossy
put it
maze
out
now?
there. Yeah, put it
no.
out there.
Okay, listen. We're talking about masks and travel and stuff. Well, I want to talk about what Dr. Fauci just said the other day.
Okay.
He he has said that we're out of the pandemic. He didn't say it exactly like that, but what did he say, Dr. Mill?
Well, he backpedaled though, didn't he, Wayne?
He backpedaled. He backpedaled like a cornerback, like he was somebody in the Super Bowl chasing a wide receiver. Gotta go back. I didn't say it right.
So, I think what he meant is that this is what he ended up with, that we're in a transitional phase from a deceleration of the numbers into hopefully a more controlled phase of the pandemic moving into endemicity, sorry, like meaning that we're going into an endemic phase.
Okay.
So what does endemic mean? It means the virus is still among us, but relatively under control. That's not what's happening, right?
Mm. Mm-mm.
Yes, there are vaccines. Yes, there are antivirals, and that's fantastic. And we don't anticipate that there will be like a huge wave like there was with Omicron in the future. But I believe there'll still be wavelets. I believe there'll still be, spikes, especially going into the winter time, the
Mm-hmm.
fall and the winter. And who is that going to affect? That's going to affect the people who are unvaccinated. It's going to be affecting the people who don't have access to care so that they can get somebody to write them a prescription for the antivirals. Who does that sound
Mm-hmm.
like? Right. So I
Mm-hmm.
say that we still need to, continue to do what makes sense for us. If you know that you are at higher risk, if you know that you live with and love people that are at higher risk, then you have
Mm-hmm.
to govern yourself accordingly and wear your mask in indoor spaces, and get vaccinated and boosted.
I agree.
Okay, so um uh-oh.
So
So
go ahead.
go ahead, Wayne.
Go ahead, live.
Well, I was going to say Dr. Mel hit on this, but let's move on to this. You said who's going to be affected the most? Who are those people? Well, those are the black and the brown people, right?
Right. Exactly.
Um, do we think that for black people, this whole we're kind of out of the pandemic fever will be good in the long run?
I mean, I think in terms of getting back to, um, commerce and making a living, that those
Mhm.
things are definitely important. And black people have lost more, small businesses during the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
Disproportionately.
Hmm.
I think returning to getting regular health care is important, because I know several people who've been diagnosed with cancer at late stages, who, had they been getting regular checkups during the pandemic, it might have been avoided, right? So those kinds of things are important, but they can still happen while wearing masks, right? I think that, where it might not be great is if we take the message that removal of mask mandates means it's safe to return to business as usual, because it's
Right.
not.
Right.
And again, we would be, people of color would be the ones, or going to be the ones, who will be disproportionately affected because of poor access to care, more underlying health conditions. And then there was this whole study that just came out that showed that the number of black people that died during the pandemic, had they gotten care at more well-resourced hospitals, i.e.
Mhm.
hospitals in the white section of town, they would have survived.
Oh.
Wow.
So it didn't necessarily have to do with the fact that they had underlying health conditions. It had everything to do with the hospitals that they chose to go to. You're going to go to your neighborhood hospital. That's
Hmm.
more than likely, if you live in the black side of town, is going to be one with less resources. For example, we have a close friend, whose brother unfortunately had severe COVID, and we tried to get him to a hospital that had something called ECMO. It's a type of therapy that can kind of keep you alive until your lungs heal. Well, in the
Okay.
hospitals that he was in, they didn't have that available. And we couldn't get him transferred to a hospital that had one, because they were all being used. Had he, maybe been at one of those hospitals that was better resourced, he would have survived. Unfortunately, he didn't. So that was just a story that I know from my own life that fit that research study that came out just recently.
I want to move to that research study, but before we do, we have the comments
That's a lot
en
of comment.
fuego. So let's get to a few of them. Crystal Shepherd Southall says, "So should we do a self-imposed lockdown if we can?"
So Again, I think there is a way to move in society in a safe way while watching the numbers in your community.
Mhm.
If go to your public health website of your city or of your county or of your state, and you can see what's happening in your community in terms of the number of positive cases or the number of hospitalizations, which at this point, the number of hospitalizations are probably going to be more accurate because they're undercounting cases because so many people are getting tested at home. And
Mhm.
then you can make a decision about how much you want to go out and interact. And if you go out and interact wearing a mask, you can still choose to have as many, family functions and whatnot outdoors as opposed to indoors and govern yourself accordingly. I don't know that from a mental health standpoint, that it's that sort of staying in that lockdown mode is really going to be the best thing for our emotional health, and our physical health as well.
And we're going to,
Agreed.
Yvonne, as usual, Yvonne, our friend of the show, we have to say that Yvonne has several great questions and statements. First, first one, and we're going to get to a few of Yvonne because this you guys show tonight. Am I killing my immune system by having 4 shots?
Mhm.
Wow, that sounds like a debunk. Um, Understand that, think of a vaccination as lifting weights, right? Every time you expose your immune system to an antigen, so that's something that stimulates your body to produce antibodies, you're actually, you know, you're actually boosting your immune system because that's what it's there to do, right? And so, no, you are not wreaking havoc on your immune system. You're actually, um, it's like a use it or lose it thing, right? So you're actually boosting your body's ability to respond to future threats, meaning future exposures to COVID. So, no, I would not be afraid of more vaccines, getting a second booster or even a third booster in the fall, because what's basically happening right now is the vaccine companies are working on a vaccine that will be more specific to the variants that are happening right now, the
Mhm.
Omicron variant and future variants. And so, there may be another booster in the fall or this time next year that's recommended. I'm there for it. I have no concerns because I would rather get that than possibly get COVID and end up with long COVID
Right.
or infect those around me who are
Exactly.
older and less robust.
Mhm.
Yeah, we tend to. This is going to be a long haul thing. I thought we would be
Mhm.
out of it. I thought we would be moved on from it, but this
Yeah.
looks like it could be a lifelong thing. Unfortunately,
Yeah. And I don't know if it'll be a lot. I hope it's not going to be a lifelong thing. I'm hoping ultimately it will burn itself out, but I
Mhm.
don't think that that's going to happen this year or next year, even the year after that. I think
thanks,
we should
Doctor
be
Clarke.
thinking about it from a long haul perspective. From
Thanks,
a,
Doctor Mel.
hey, I'm just being real. And I think if you project into the future and say, yeah, this might last very a few years, if it ends 3 years from now, then that'll be icing on the cake.
Right.
Rather than telling people, "Oh yeah, this will be gone by April." And 2 years later, here we are.
It'll
Interesting.
it'll it'll whi- it'll whisper away when the summer
Right. Exactly.
famous last words.
Famous last words.
It'll
Right.
all disappear when the summer comes.
Right.
Lie, what you
uh,
got?
well, I was gonna just so uh for everyone watching, Wayne and I both have a bunch of monitors, and so we're looking around and catching comments and stuff. I just want y'all to know we are present, but we're trying to grab everything that's happening in chats
Mm-hmm.
and in different places.
In Chatland.
Um in Chatland. Um speaking of, well, We spoke of masks and being on planes and et cetera, et cetera. Are you all finding, I have an answer to this. Are you all finding that people of color, are you finding more people of color with their masks on versus others?
What do you think, Wayne?
I think people of color are more cautious. Just in general, we don't believe it's. I mean, some of us don't believe it's over. I mean, everywhere I go, and if I look and there's some people that aren't of color versus some people of color, the more the people of color have more masks on.
Right. So you would be in you're in line with what the research studies are showing that just
Okay.
came out. 76% of Black people are like getting back to normal means wearing a mask, and
Right.
55% of Hispanic people say that, only 38% of white people. And when you go out, that's who has masks on, are people of color. I
Yep.
was at a conference, and the president of Meharry School of Medicine basically said, "Yeah, Black people are the ones that are out here wearing masks." And the commissioner of public health for Nashville, where the conference was like, "Yeah, that's what I see too, because Black people don't trust the healthcare system. That if they get sick, they're gonna get a fair shake. So they figure they'll just take matters in their own hands and wear their mask." Now, I don't know if that, explains everything, but at least that was what was discussed, and a lot of people seem to agree with him. So I don't know what Chatland thinks about that, but yeah.
Mimi Love says facts.
Yep, right. I was gonna. Oh, it's Tanisha Monique Miles says that's because they weren't vaccinated too.
Oh,
Okay.
That
Yeah,
might be
that's
some,
a
yeah,
part of
because
it.
people
Yeah,
that
who
that's
are
that's a
definitely
part of
part
it.
unvaccinated
of
are,
it.
yeah, that is part of it. They are actually, I think, probably some people who are unvaccinated are more cautious, than people who are vaccinated. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that is a reality.
Wow. Do you think there's still, we haven't really talked about this in a really long time, but do you think there's still some residual Tuskegee experiment stuff floating around in our heads about it, Dr. Mel?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think, I still get sent items to put in the debunk, and that's still out there. Believe it or not, the 5G chips thing is still out
The
there.
5G
Oh
Um,
chips
yeah. No,
thing is still
it's
they're
still
there.
out
giving
there.
us yeah, they're giving us COVID. That's still out there. That's directly from Tuskegee. That the vaccines are actually giving us COVID. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so there is definitely a lot of that still out there. There's it's not natural. I'm only going
Hmm.
to, take my CMOS and vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc and echinacea and elderberry. And so I'm not going to mess with the vaccine because it's not natural and these things are natural. Yeah, there's still a lot of that.
I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I just people who are taking the sea moss from people whose houses look like they would never go in that house unless unless that sea moss was sold. Like you wouldn't even buy from that person, but you see they have sea moss, and you heard so much about it, and you think it cures or it'll keep COVID away from you. I'm just saying it does a lot of things. It may have a lot of uh, medicinal medicinal purposes.
Right.
Stopping
Have you
COVID ain't
tried it,
worth it.
Wayne? Have you tried CMOS?
Have I? I have. I have.
Hmm.
I did.
And
I
and
couldn't.
let,
I
let,
couldn't
let
get
me
it
be
down.
clear.
Couldn't keep it.
I'm not saying don't take your supplements. Not saying that at all.
Right.
What I am saying is that those things have not prevented pandemics in the past. That those
Right.
things of people that, who have taken it has not prevented them from getting sick from
Yeah.
COVID. We
So
do know
so
that vaccination keeps you out of the hospital,
that's
and
it.
overwhelmingly keeps you alive when you're
Hmm.
vaccinated. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of proof in that. There's just not enough proof yet for the supplements. And
So
so you can still do both. You can walk
right.
and chew gum.
Right.
Right.
I get it.
which is what I do. I take vitamin D, I take vitamin
Hmm.
C, and I take echinacea. I'm not endorsing them to my audience, but I'm just being open that yeah, I do both. I've gotten vaccinated, and I also, um, I also
Take
do that.
supplement. Yeah.
So just going to the comments again, we got Alexis Proctor Kellum who says, unfortunately, many people of color in low socioeconomic areas are not vaccinated and don't wear masks.
That's true, but that's also true. Also, as I mentioned, our white brothers and sisters, that's what we have
Mhm.
in common with them.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
it's not just us. The misinformation has been spread around liberally, and a lot of people have bought into it. But you know what though? The numbers are for the most part that about overall, about 60% of African Americans across the country are vaccinated. In some states, though, it's much lower than that. It's like
Hmm.
closer to 40%. Um, so yeah, it kind of really depends where you are in the country. Florida, um, always a state of distinction, um,
Mhm.
is the has the lowest vaccination rate for African Americans relative to whites.
Right.
Wow. Yvonne says that she's eating better so she can get off of these supplements. What you eating, Yvonne? Tell us what's in your diet. Um, when you
Also,
have some more, I'm gonna move on to some other things, but I'll take if you have some questions or comments, I will let you jump
Actually,
in
just,
can
there.
while Yvonne is typing that, that's an excellent point. That the one thing outside of masks and ventilation and vaccination that has been proven to cut the risk of severe outcomes from COVID is losing weight if you're overweight.
Mhm.
So that is the one. So eating better does, in terms of it leading to weight loss, because we know that when we're overweight or obese, our bodies are in a state of heightened inflammation. And so if we get
Mhm.
COVID, then that sort of overwhelming inflammation picture is more likely to happen. And so the correlation with being closer to an ideal weight is protective against severe outcomes again with COVID.
yeah.
Okay, so she responded with vegetables. Someone else said Tanisha said colorful salads,
Mhm.
um, elderberry, farro, couscous, salads every day. Okay, all
Okay.
All
right.
right.
All right. All
Cool.
right. Couscous. Come on,
We getting it
couscous.
in. We getting it in. And we did a whole show with Dr. Kofi Essel. He was excellent from GW. If you all want to go back and watch it, about
Yes,
food is
All right.
medicine. It was excellent show.
yes,
So
yes,
yeah.
yes. El
Okay.
Reed watermelon is a great
So,
one. Yes.
so we got a question from, we mentioned vaccines and COVID and couple things. Uh, Roz Parker says, unfortunately, many educated people of color, long on opinions, short on facts, believe supplements alone are enough, and having a healthy immune system is enough. So thanks, Roz, for that comment. Or, I mean, Dr. Clarke, are you going to comment on that, or Dr. Mel?
Yeah, I mean, y'all have heard me say it before. There are only two ways to get antibodies to COVID: to get COVID or to get vaccinated.
Okay.
Right.
S- Supplements and you know, all those other things that we named do not give you antibodies.
Okay.
They make sure that your body is in a state of readiness to respond to COVID, but it doesn't give you antibodies. And antibodies are what your body uses to fight off disease.
And then we got Elise Perry saying, I'm hearing the vaccine is creating other odd maladies, dizziness, more susceptible to common cold situations, other oddities. Any comment on that?
Yeah, so I thanks Elise, great question. I kind of only go with with research studies. And I think a lot of times what happens is people go into that vaccine adverse event reporting database, the VAERS database, where things that happen after you get the vaccine get reported, and they're pulling things out of there and saying, see, the vaccine caused this. But the
Right.
purpose of that database is to be able to study the population as a whole and know that dizziness happens, car accidents happen, hangnails happen, heart attacks happen. And so what they're trying to see is, when you look at the entire, millions and millions of people that have gotten vaccinated, are we seeing a spike or uptick above baseline? And there are only one or two things that have really been an uptick above baseline, which we know about. We know that with the Johnson and Johnson vaccine, there was a uptick in mainly in young women, in the blood clotting disorder, very
Mhm.
rare, something like 7 out of 1 million in across the board that happened to. That's 7 out of 1 million too many people. And so they pull back the Johnson and Johnson vaccine, don't recommend it for that age group. Um, so, and then the same thing for the mRNA, the vaccines in young men, they did see an increase in inflammation of the heart. Again, very rare, and very mild, and way less often than the blood clotting and the inflammation of the heart that happens with COVID. But there is also that consideration. Those are the only two things they've actually seen an uptick in. The other things have been investigated. I know there was a concern about it stopping women's periods. I believe that um, didn't pan out to be anything long term or anything of serious consequence. And many of the other claims also have been studied, looked at, and have not panned out.
Okay.
And Yvonne made a really good point, and I really agree with this, that we're much more hyper aware of the little things that are, some of them little, some of them not so little, but we're much more hyper aware of things that are happening in our bodies and to people that we know while we're in this pandemic, stuff that we may not have paid attention to the way we are now. We're definitely aware of those things. And certainly if something like the headache or whatever is happening after a vaccination, I think we're just more aware that some things have happened.
Oh, and thank you, Lila. That's also a good point. I know for myself personally, when I get the COVID vaccine, I know that I have to budget a half a day to a day
Mhm,
where I know that I'm going to be achy. I may have a
mhm,
headache. I might get a fever, but
mhm,
I know that after 24 hours it goes away. I know that it's my body's response to ramping up antibodies. And
mhm.
so I know what it is. I know to expect it. And then after that 12 to 24 hours is over, I'm fine. I
I
go
was
on
going to
about my
say the
business.
same thing. I was going to say the
Yeah.
same thing. I know I'm going to be sleepy and fall asleep watching Ozark. Just know it.
I can't
Right.
Just
fall asleep to that dark show. So dark.
I love
I
it.
know.
I love
I
Ozark.
love
So
it too.
we have a question from Ellen Claire Lamb. Here we go, Ellen Claire Lamb. Can you explain how they measure virus loads in wastewater? What kind of lag time is there between infection rates and it showing up in the water? Can we catch COVID from dirty water like in a flooding situation? Flooding
Ooh, those are
situation.
excellent questions.
Ooh.
So, wastewater surveillance is one of the ways. Actually, it's been around for over a year or two during this pandemic, or over a year, in terms of the ways that public health authorities are monitoring what's happening with COVID in the population. Because, as we mentioned, so many people are testing at home. It sometimes there's really no way now to keep track of what's happening. And so we actually saw uptick in the wastewater surveillance. I think I talked about that maybe about a month ago,
Mhm.
that sort of preceded what we see happening now with the rise in cases. And that's where they're getting the estimates that we might be underreporting cases by as much as 90%. Um,
Wow.
yeah. So can we catch COVID from dirty water? I actually I haven't had a chance to actually look to understand that, but for the most part, we know that COVID is inhaled, um, and in terms of the lifespan in dirty water, I don't think it would be sort of alive long enough in dirty water to cause any particular kind of harm. Plus, the concentration of it in dirty water, remember, you have to get a significant concentration of it inhaled or that you're exposed to cause you problems. So it would have to be a super concentrated amount of COVID in the water, theoretically. Um, so
Yes.
so yeah.
I just want to say this, Ellen. Uh, just stay away from really blue water in the swimming pool. That means if somebody has like a little blue circle around them, stay away from that water.
The comments of the producers do not necessarily
Are
reflect that of the
exactly.
host.
Say it may not
They
Thank
have
you.
COVID in it.
Thank
they
you, Ellen. No, that was a
they
It
great
may not
question.
have COVID in it, but you definitely do not want to go near that.
So listen, this is a really interesting producer show because I have to tell y'all out there in streaming land. I told Dr. Mel people tired. They might not want to talk
Mm,
about COVID, but y'all have
people,
all the questions tonight. So that's
yeah.
awesome. That's fantastic. I want to, but I'm taking a little turn. So if you have other questions related to COVID, drop them in the chat. I'm taking a little turn. And I want to do this publicly because all of us, Dr. Mel, myself, and Wayne, especially the last several months, we're all caregivers. Um, and so shout out to you, Wayne, for doing all the things that you have been doing, producing the show, caring for dad, everything that has gone into that. It is no small feat.
Mm.
Any of you out there in Facebook and YouTube land, if you are a caregiver or ever have been, you know that it is no small feat. And when you add navigating a pandemic and work and all of those other things to that, it is a lot. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge what you have been doing, Wayne, acknowledge you, Dr. Mel, for all of the support in navigating the stuff that has to be navigated, but want you, Dr. Mel, to talk about how caregivers can kind of take care of themselves in the midst of all of this kind of stuff, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of having an aging parent who needs a high level of care.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and we struggle with that, the answer to that in our own personal lives. But
Mhm.
I would always say, just like they say when you're strapping in your seat on the airline, that if there's a sudden loss of cabin pressure and your oxygen mask drop, put it on yourself first before you put it on the person next to you. I would say that
Yeah.
that's definitely true of caregiving. That you have to build in time and build in structures and processes into your caregiving so that it allows you to have the time to take care of yourself. Because, especially if you're the caregiving type, where you think of
Yeah.
other people before you think of yourself, it's going to wear you down. It's going to age you. It's going to uh, prematurely bring on chronic disease in your life because you're not getting the five basic things that we always talk about, the self-health actions.
Mhm.
Eating nutritiously, a lot of times that falls by the wayside, and
Mhm.
under stress we reach for the sweet thing or the comfort food. um, it might disturb your sleep, especially if you're directly caregiving and somebody needs you in the middle of the night. We know that
Mhm.
when you don't get your sleep, you have aging of the nervous system, which can prematurely bring on other, kinds of diseases. Um, Inactivity, in terms of not building in time to walk and get fresh air and get sunshine, that goes by the wayside too. So I think setting up structures, um, you know, who is your village? Who can spell you,
Mhm.
right? That's super important. Um, if you're, depending on the level of care that your loved one needs, there's also respite care that a lot of insurance
Mhm.
companies and Medicaid will pay for. So just a couple of 2, 3 days, at a place where the person can, be for a few days so that you can get some care if you have no other support system to give you that. Also really important. And then support groups, just knowing that there are other people out there going through the same thing,
Mhm.
sharing, notes, tips, caregiving tips, just talking to somebody about what you're going through. Because a lot of times I know for my other friends that I know of who are also caregiving, there's also that parent child tension, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes you just got to get it off your chest, right? You got to vent. And so that's really, really important to do.
Yeah.
Wayne, I'm going to ask you to answer, but I just have one other thing to add on to what Dr. Mill said. I couldn't have said it that way, but the other thing, particularly around the respite care, don't feel guilty about it.
Right.
When you are taking care of someone else, it is a lot. A
Mm-hmm.
lot, a lot. Particularly, and I'm saying this from my own experience, particularly an aging relative that has dementia or some other sort of memory issues. It's a lot. Don't feel guilty about needing to take some time for yourself.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne,
Absolutely.
anything you want to add, Wayne?
Yeah, I mean the comments. I'm looking at the comments, and everybody are so kind, and a whole lot of caregivers, and shout out to Lila who did it at the beginning of the pandemic, like really,
Mm-hmm.
and shout out to Dr. Mel who has
Who's
done it
done it?
at the top at a high level for a long time. Uh, this is the second go around for me being a caregiver. I was a caregiver to my mom before she passed, and it's it that I think I had more energy when I was younger, and also was I was more bullheaded. I mean, I would run through walls, but I would take people with me. And so I've learned that you can't do that. Like you can't take your feelings out on other people. It's better to figure out
Mm,
what you should do instead of taking
mm,
out your feelings. Figure out, figure out the plan and give
mhm.
yourself that uh and give yourself an opportunity to implement the plan and know in the end that the creator has his plan. And
Yeah.
we
Mm-hmm.
in my eyes that we all fall under the plan of the creator. I don't care who you believe in. I don't care what you call them. I believe that we fall under the plan of creator. And I can say that, you know, I'm trying to be as, you know, just
Diplomatic,
diplomatic as
neutral,
possible.
neutral.
You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Like in one thing that the pandemic and COVID has really given us is an opportunity to reflect and be still and having
Mhm.
to be still. And I think that that's giving us a hit uh, somewhat of a jump start on how we should plan. I mean, we get a chance to sit down when nothing and to do it when everybody was still. You know,
Right.
Mhm.
it had its difficulties, but it also had its benefits. And so we
Yeah.
had to look at it in that sense that it also had its benefits. Also, I want to say this, man, the when you let people know what you're going through and are open, people will love up on you and really
Mm.
pray and send great energy your way, and you will be surprised who will be sending great energy to you. People, one thing I have had in this pandemic is a belief in man that we will do the great thing and have the greater good. I just believe that we will. So, I mean, unfortunately, I heard early on Dr. Clarke say, we might not be out of this thing for a while, like a long time. I ain't really going to tell our audience that, but hey, man, she predicted this a few years ago. I'm just saying, she was on
Yeah,
top
and
of it.
I don't have any inside knowledge. Just put that out there. I
Right.
have no
You don't
inside
have any
knowledge.
inside,
Right.
but you called this one. We were sitting here, you called it. And I mean, I was I was I was there with you. But I want to get back to people's questions. So I don't want to take up this
Okay.
time.
What
Thank you.
else is it going on in
Thank you,
Chatland?
Lie. Thank you, Lie.
Yes, thank you, Lila.
I
Great
have some
question.
people uh oh, Crystal Shepherd Southall said this. Also know that if you're a caregiver, your spouse and your children are also impacted.
Yes,
Yes.
right.
There you go.
Yes.
Because there's only X amount of energy that you have, right? And
Right.
you can't, if you're focused over here, then the energy that you give to others is important. I think that's important. That's an excellent point, Crystal, to let people know that up front, because then your own guilt will get into your subconscious and
Mhm.
you'll start to take it out on them because you feel guilty you're not spending enough time with them.
Yes.
Whereas you
Yeah.
need to sit down as a family and say, look, these are the demands on mommy, or these are the demands on daddy, or my spouse, look, these are the demands that I have over
One,
here.
two.
How can we support each other through this? Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
I s-
I've been asked to turn up my mic. I think I just need to talk louder into it. So
Okay. I saw a comment somewhere that said vent to people who have been, this is about caregiving, vent to people who have been through it or have an understanding. And I just have to say that is completely true.
That is
Wayne was,
completely true.
it's so true because there are people that don't understand it, right? I
Yeah.
called Wayne a couple of weeks ago. It was not a good day. It wasn't. It was not a good day. And I was like, dude, I get it. And we started sharing some stories and ended up crying, laughing because we understood.
Yeah.
We understood those moments that are like, oh, I don't. I
Yeah.
don't have the capacity. When you could talk to somebody who understands it, that is
right,
super, super helpful.
right.
Super helpful.
Look,
You
I have a confession. Wayne said this is his second time around. When he was going through his first time around, I had no clue. I had absolutely no clue. We were
Oh,
dating and I had absolutely no
wow.
clue. And now in
you let out a
hindsight, I
big secret
understand.
there, ma'am. You let out a big
Yeah.
secret, Dr. Mel.
now, now I did? Okay,
Yeah.
well, now I understand in retrospect, some of the challenges that he was going through because I since have gone through and go
Hmm.
through the caregiver journey. But it
Hmm.
does make all the difference in the world. Experience is an incredible teacher.
Also,
Indeed.
laugh. There will be
Laugh.
moments.
Yeah.
Laugh.
Take advantage to laugh when you need
Yes.
joy. Bring joy into
Yes.
everything. Look,
Yes.
that situation where Lila and I were talking, and it wasn't a great day,
Mhm.
and we literally cried, but we
We did.
cried laughing. I mean,
Laughing. Yeah.
literally cried laughing. 'Cause
Because it's just some stuff that
if I
that
could
only
tell you,
caregivers
if
know.
I could
Yeah.
share, it would be the funniest thing. I want to say
So
this.
look, we got okay, say it, and because we have something that we moved to the end of the show that we got to get to.
Right, right, right.
Oh,
But
yeah, that's true.
we have
Yeah.
one. We have one. Where's my man's comments? He asked a question. He asked a question. I want to get to his question, and it was a great question because we need to know. That's when you stall. You start talking about the question. It was a great question, and someone asked this question and said, "How do you raise your energy level? What do you do to raise your energy level?" And that's a real question. I'm just saying.
I would say it depends why your energy level is low. Is it a physical issue? Is it an emotional issue? Is it, are you not getting enough sleep? There's so many sort of inputs into what goes into your energy level. It would really be really hard to answer that. So I would go back to the 5 self-health actions, right? Sleep, getting enough sleep. What are you eating? Are you eating things that are giving you sugar rushes? Are you drinking a lot of coffee and then you're having, crashes at the end of the day? Are you under inordinate amount of stress that's serving as a sapper of your energy? So then you need to put into your emotional reservoir by meditating or doing more fun things or praying or taking up a hobby that repletes you, right? Are you dehydrated? I know when I get dehydrated, I fall asleep. So, are you getting enough hydration, right? That's super important. Are there medicines that you're supposed to be on? Are you taking them on a regular basis? So again, there's several things that go into your energy level. So I would say, and depression. Are you depressed? Do you need to reach out to your primary care doctor or a mental health counselor to talk about depression? And if all those things aren't the case, talk with your primary care doctor if you're having low energy levels. Maybe you need a checkup. So several different things. Long answer. No short
All
answer to
right.
that question.
And they said they were recently diagnosed with sleep apnea, don't sleep well, have a very poor diet, and stuck in a habitual pattern of destruction. Talk to your primary care doctor first. So
Right.
you know what's next. It's
And
generally early on.
get that sleep apnea treated.
Get that
Definitely.
sleep apnea. You know what's next.
The weekly debunk. Stopping misinformation in its tracks.
You got it?
Oh, I got it.
Twitter finger.
This is Timothy Twitter Fingers, the Twitter finger outlaw. I saw on an online magazine say the triple vaccinated now up to 5 times. The triple vaccinated, Timmy can't write a daggone thing. The triple vaccinated now up to 5 times more likely to be infected with COVID-19 than the unvaccinated. Timothy, get your life together and get your typing together.
I don't know about that. Excuse me, Dr. Mel. Is that true?
No, it is not true. And I actually went and researched and found the online magazine that they were talking about. And basically, vaccine effectiveness against symptomatic disease, so getting symptoms from COVID, during Omicron did go down, right? Because the Omicron variant was able to sort of sideswipe the antibodies that were produced against the vaccine. And so people who got Omicron have probably a little better protection against the Omicron variant than people who were vaccinated in terms of getting symptoms.
Okay.
However, the vaccine is overwhelmingly still effective at keeping you out of the hospital and keeping you alive. So, and again, what the Twitter finger family member here is saying, they're talking about comparing the vaccine to those who are unvaccinated, not unvaccinated people who got Omicron. It turns out that the people who have the best protection right now today are people who got vaccinated and also got Omicron, right?
Oh.
Those people have are best protected right now today, right? Those who are vaccinated, though, who never got Omicron, are still have greater odds of not being hospitalized and not dying than people who are unvaccinated and did not get Omicron. Okay. So that's important to remember. Now, like I said, I looked up the article. When I read the article, they had this reference that you were supposed to click through to. So I clicked through to the reference. It was from the UK Health Security Agency. That's actually a thing. And they had all these graphs in the Twitter finger article that Mr. Twitter finger read. None of those graphs were in the reference article. They were all made up. So what that statistic that's quoted there is totally fabricated by by the first article, the actual thing that it pointed you to, the real reference article that was actually scientifically based, had none of that data in it. So it just kind of shows you how misinformation works online, that there's this information and they can fabricate it and claim that it came from another source. And unless you actually go read the other source, you'll believe that this information was legitimate.
All right. Well, that's it for the producer show live.
Well, I am so happy that y'all took over. This was a whole lot of fun. I want to remind everybody about the Howard University study that is about COVID, surviving in this time of COVID and resilience. It's filling out an online survey. You can be compensated up to $100 depending on how much of the survey you fill out. If you're interested, please email Dana Harvey at Dana, D-A-N-A, Harvey, H-A-R-V-E-Y, research at gmail.com. That would be great if you did that. It's totally voluntary study, though. And Dana Harvey will give you all the information you need about it. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Lila. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you to the audience. Y'all were great guests. Y'all had some great comments. And until next week, remember, be wise, be well, and be health empowered.